order, and I will have Blair do roll call.
Mr. Grinberg?
Here.
Mr. Steen?
Here.
Ms. Fry?
Here.
Mr. Hagan?
Here.
Ms. Haugen?
Here.
Ms. Comer? Mr. Madler?
Here.
Ms. Bollinger?
Here. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the April 4th minutes, which were included both emailed and in the packet in front of you. So if they've been reviewed, do I have a motion to approve or any changes?
So moved.
And a
Second.
second? And a second by Rick. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion pass. Just wanted to highlight, we provided some first quarter, January, February, March data for our adult protective services. And just remember that that is for Region 5, not just Cass County, the numbers, but looking, statewide is the bottom part of the reports for vulnerable adult services. And then up on top is just some stats for the current first quarter, as well as economic assistance. These are Cass County, Cass caseload counts, not by our region that we're working in today. So these are just in our county and looking at the first quarter of 2023. Both by number of programs, like individual or a household in one program, individual and household receiving 2 programs, services, maybe a SNAP and a LIHEAP, and then so forth. So it kind of gives you an idea. The green is March of 2023 compared, it's a little lower in one program, but it gives the historical. If you just look at the increase, one program from October of 2022 to March of 2023, there is an increase just generally overall. I think that gives an idea. With 2 programs, that is a slight decrease, but really in the same avenue. Not many people in the area that we serve in Cass County are on all 5 programs. That is very infrequent. To go from there. And then there's some specific data for case counts also on that. The what was mailed prior was the April 2023 recruiting and personnel data update, and I provided an updated copy of one in the email today, or it's sitting in front of you too. So I thought we could just go over that to give a little update. I believe I sent out to everybody as of May 5th. Heather Collins left the zone for a different opportunity in the community. So surely appreciate her time and her impact she had in the zone. And I tried my hardest to change her mind, but it was a great opportunity for her, and we thank her for her time of service here. There was a heavy lift, and she helped us start getting in the right direction. So this gives you an overview regarding recruiting and personnel update currently as of April, the end of April. So we're mid-May now. We've added some of those things like Heather, we added to here, but zone-wide, we have 28 vacancies. 19 of those are in family services. 7 currently are in economic assistance, and then we have 2 in administration. One of those in administration is a billing and credentialing specialist, and that was part of the family services recruitment and retention plan. So that is a new position that we've elected at this point in time to put our emphasis in different areas in recruiting, and that will come when the opportunity is now. We'll talk a little bit about our plan moving forward with family services, because that is everyone and every position is important, but it's really critical right now to do some things there. So new positions created with additional vacancies. That retention and recruitment plan that was kind of put into place at the beginning of the year, it's a great opportunity in family services for internal promotions. But with those internal promotions produces vacancies. Ultimately, it will be good for the department. It will strengthen, it will provide internal opportunities for team members to move up. But right now, it's a challenge. We have done an internal promotion for an economic assistance program manager. Shayna Huvenen is now our program manager. She's right back there. She is a economic assistant supervisor that is now in that manager role in that department, but really wearing both hats and many more at this time because we're down to, if she totally sat out, we'd only have 2 supervisors in economic assistance. So working through that, we have part of that recruitment and retention plan in family services was adding additional CPS supervisor, and that role has been filled with an internal promotion as well as a CPS trainer. And then we have a foster care placement coordinator that was filled with an internal promotion. So all of those roles, they're going to have to continue doing some of what they do right now because we're so short. And then we're going to work into strengthening that additional arm in family services. We also have added an operations, family services operations supervisor that supervises that onboarding and retention area in family services, that training, onboarding, and foster care placement. And that was an internal promotion. All great things. We were really busy interviewing this last month because those positions were open both internally and externally. And then the billing and credentialing position is on hold. Some other updates. As you know, we're working as a region for economic assistance. So we are part of Region 4. Since we've been having challenges filling some economic assistant worker positions, 4 of those FTEs have been transferred to other regions within, or other zones within our region because they had people that would fill those positions. So those ultimately are strengthening the region and the ability to work because they're filled FTEs now. We have also transferred a eligibility worker supervisor to another region within our zone because they have a person for that. The plan is they will be having a retirement and we will get that FTE returned. So there's a little, I don't want to say a shell game, it's not really a shell game, but for the good of the whole region that we're working as one with, it was best to transfer those FTEs, allowing those other zones to hire people, because it will ultimately impact the work that all the workers are doing. Talked about Heather. The last month and a half has been spent a lot of time focusing on family services. Feel free to ask questions.
I've got a
as we go.
question.
Okay, sorry, Rick.
Since you took a
You're
breath.
usually over there.
Since you took a breath, no. Just a couple of questions. You talk about Region 5, and I'm assuming you've probably shared that with us, what Region 5 is. I just don't recall, because you have 19 zones, and Region 5 must be the southeast region, I'm guessing, but
Region 5 for APS services is the southeast corner of North Dakota, not the same as Economic Assistance Region
Different
4.
region.
Yes. This is the regions of the state.
Right.
You know, so
so
Richland,
when you
Ransom.
talk about Region 5 for any service, are we talking about the same region? Or are we talking about for this service, this is a region, this service, this is another region?
for economic assistance, the state is split up into 4 regions, not following what the, Region 5, Region 3, not the same regions that the state typically is. It's in 4 regions. So for economic assistance, our region goes from here, Stutzman, whatever Valley City, Jamestown is, Barnes, RSR, Richlands, Sergeant Ransom, and then all the way over like to Emmons County, wherever Linton is, those counties, South Country is called.
Yep.
So it's quite a wide region. And we can talk about this. I'm open to any advice with this or as an advisory council. I would say it's been a interesting experience with redesign because the volume of cases are CAS coming from our county because the population is here. Much different volume than what would be in South Country or even Barnes, Buffalo Bridges, so that's a different thing. Good question.
And so part of that would be, didn't even think about this before I asked the first question, it would be like, then there must be a good rationale. You said we go way over here, this region's way over here, so it must be something other than geography, obviously. It's population somehow or service availability, whatever. It'd be kind of nice at one point in time to at least understand the concept behind this is one region for this is another region for this. Because then really, as a zone director, Gail, you've got a number of different reporting units, I'll call it for that matter, because if you're at state and you've got a zone and you've got 2 different regions for this services, it doesn't seem to be, in my point of view, very logical as far as how we're operating as a zone. Then it's just like, we've got a bunch of state components that are gonna mix them up and you're gonna do this, 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 and the other thing. So you don't really focus on one area because you got all these other things to worry about. And this board is focused on one area, right? Cass County zone. So it just seems to bring this board up to speed to be kind of a nice, I know if we had that opportunity at some point in time to see how does all this fit and then where does the zone board fit in all this? Because now your responsibility isn't necessarily just Cass County, it's way beyond a lot of different regions.
I'll say a
My
couple
thoughts on
things.
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Adult Protective Services, my understanding, has always been a program, even when of social services here, even when it was not a zone. And I'm not sure at that point in time if they provided the services to the surrounding counties, because not every social services agency or county provided adult protective services. It's that same right now, like we have workers, but Agassiz Valley or Burleigh County might not provide that as a service. We've continued that service and have 4 FTEs, but that service, I'll just admit, it's a bit confusing because really I view that as I'm operationally supervising that program, and there's a state partner that really is their program person. But I field all the complaints. Yeah.
So I maybe am the only one that's confused, but it would be just at some point to educate the board on where
Okay.
we're at with that. That was my first question. Second question I have is with regard to all the different services and the changes. You've got these month-to-month changes. Mm-hmm. And I think when you go to that table where it's got 1 program, 2 program, whatever, they have the case percentage. And I look back at the graph, this must be, some of these programs are very cyclical, of course, like LIHEAP is very much, yeah. How about the others? Are they cyclical? I know typically is it springtime, you guys would know this, springtime you've got an awful lot of, fall is when you see a lot more child protection stuff, I think, because the kids are going to school, right, and teachers become aware of what's going on, so that's very cyclical in nature. And so I think one thing that, from my perspective anyway, so you have these changes, so I see the changes month to month, but knowing that some of it's fairly cyclical, it'd be nice to see what's the zone actually doing from year to year, and so to compare March to last March, or quarterly, we used to do that, so how, what's happening in the zone compared to last year? So
And
right
that's
now,
what we're trying to get to, like that's what we started back in
October
of 2022.
Or even further look back, like 5 years might be interesting to me to see what these changes have had an impact on the people serving in Cass County.
You know, I'm not sure how that data was collected in the past. This is the avenues we have to be able to pull the data now, but I do agree. Plus the volume, I would assume our numbers have increased in 5 years. Yeah, the population growth.
I think it would be very interesting, because you're right, population growth, but I can tell you from the perspective of job service and the jobs program, which is the program attached to receiving TANF, that's a
Right.
requirement. Caseloads have never been as slow as they've been in the last few
Mhm.
years, and they're just not rebounding. And it would be interesting to see why that is.
A little bit about the cash grant part of that. So,
Yeah, just 2 thoughts. I mean, it somehow has to have some comparison that, at least from my perspective, is more meaningful than month to month to month, because it's like, because I know it's cyclical, and I know this happens, and then we've got staffing issues that are also cyclical. Used to be, I'm not sure about anymore, you know, they are not, or just to see, are we keeping pace with the utilization? And, you know, one of the things that I think the zone board's responsible for is being an advocate for adequate providers, you know, and outcomes. And if we don't have the people to provide the services, we're not gonna have great outcomes, I don't think so. But I don't know how to put all that together. When I look at this and say, yeah, we're growing, but I see the staffing, obviously, we have a staffing issue. Yeah, that's given right now. It'd be nice to know, are we keeping pace with in some fashion, so.
and I suspect, Rick, I agree with that. Because of redesign and economic assistance, it's very hard, because we're working as one in a region, and now, actually I don't think it was maybe split up as appropriately as it could have been. I think they're realizing the volume because of Cass County. So the southwest corner, that region is Region 3. 3. Their volume is fairly low. So guess what? They're working some of our cases. Our region, I'm saying as a region, our cases. And actually the rest, all 3 regions are now working Region 4's cases.
And that's one of the issues we had, having been somewhat associated with the Cass County Social Services for 8 years, whatever. That was one of the issues we always talked about. Is it seems to me our utilization for our workers here in Cass County were always exceptionally high. We had stats to at least try to demonstrate that. Now, we still must have stats on how many cases are being handled by each worker and that type of thing. I mean, even on a region-wide basis, it's someone's keeping track of how many cases are being handled by each location somehow.
Actually, and Shayna, I'm more than happy for you to chime in. Actually, it's not by a case anymore. I'm not Susie. It's no more case management. It's a process management approach. It's a work item that goes to worker A, and then that work item might go to worker B.
And we can make track by work items. I mean, however you want to define it, it's a work item.
Which is what we're not getting information.
Correct. They've been attempting to track work items, and it's not been as statistically accurate as we think it should be, because the system needs some fix to report correctly, and they're not weighting some of those items differently than they might weight something that's like,
Sure.
you know, that is less labor intensive. And so somebody might be completing, say, 6 work items, but that might be a full day's work compared to other items that only take about 20 minutes. You know,
Yep.
so it's,
Gotcha.
we don't have those statistics right now because they're still trying to figure out how to compile them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we need to be able to paint the story.
And since I have the mic, one last item. Has anybody seen a lost cell phone? Thank you. I figured it was back there. I'll pick it up later. Thank you.
I got a question on that too. So these count of cases, is that individuals in your report? Let's say, whatever month.
I'd say that'd be a household.
Correct.
So these are households. We should indicate that if it's households and maybe how many people we're affecting, like Rick is saying? And I'm just,
household and
we're just talking out loud,
Yep.
you don't have to do it today, but, and if we're tracking a process, you could have 10 steps, do you track 10 steps? I mean, it just seems like we're not tracking how many individuals we're affecting. We're, moving paper around, you could add another step and think, boy, you're really taking care of a lot of people, but you're just adding one more step.
And that went out, that redesign was February 13th, I think, of 2023 is when so there are some hurdles, I would say, within the system of redesign, within workers understanding we're moving to a process management and not, I'm not just saying Cass County or Cass Human Service Zone, across the state. And then there is a customer support center, which it's a call center. That's where we are supposed to, individuals really are supposed to go to the self-service portal or the call center to start if they have any questions or redirect. The call center right now, they have hired 25, I believe, Deloitte workers to assist with manning the call center because the 20-some across the state, the call volume is, they're not being able to meet it. So that, and we gave numbers. We gave numbers of what walks in. We gave numbers of how many calls, how many emails we got in. And I don't know what happened, but.
I'll just jump in on that conversation. I remember that conversation we had in this room, and everybody here said this is not going to be enough. So who's making these decisions? Obviously, it's not your local zone board, because we have nothing to do with it, right? And I just remember that discussion so clearly, and everyone's agreeing with you. It's like, well, this is not going to be enough people. And so we hired, basically double the workforce through Deloitte, and I'll guarantee you, we're paying about 3 times per hour than we would be hiring somebody. Just
And we
the way
don't
that
have the
works.
knowledge and skills to really serve the population they're supposed to be serving.
Right. It's really a tier 1 as the approach. It would be our partners at the state making those decisions. And much of redesign was probably before my time, not that I'm I don't know how that was all developed, but in my time here, we did share some of those concerns. And we still have some concerns regarding they're called swim lanes, we have 4 lanes, and people have a people manager and a program manager. So for example, Shayna can be people managing some people here, but she also is program managing people across the region that we work with. So she can have a person right next door to her, a colleague, fellow employee, but she might be that person's people supervisor, but she is not that person's program supervisor. So if that person has a program-related question, the direction we have been given is Shayna might be able to answer that question, just lickety-split, but that person needs to be directed to their program manager, which is, it's a hard thing to do, to be quite honest, and it's a hard thing to split program and people, I think, management.
There's really not a lot of accountability in a system like that.
No, but we have to do the reviews, we have to, if there's a performance-related thing, there's a lot of communication and relationship. I think some hurdles. For a smaller zone, it works out great because they maybe have 5 staff, might be working great.
So just one more. So on March 23rd, we had 12,877 people or cases. So that could be anywhere from 12,877 families, or we could have
Households.
households. So you could have 25,000 people in that in March. And the other question is, maybe we're going to get to it, maybe give us heads up on this SNAP stuff that was in the media. There's some questions on SNAP. There was an article in there about running out of food or whatever it was, and I was like, really?
Oh,
And you
thanks, Brian. That was, I think, a whistleblower thing. We're getting numerous, people need to receive their benefits in a timely manner. People should not be worried about where they get their food. If they qualify, they should get their food. We've been following up on some things. I will confidently say that it's not our team members. It is a product of some of the barriers of the system. And work items get lost or they get scanned in and they're not getting processed appropriately. So that was a situation on that. And we followed up. I think that in that particular situation was rectified that day or the next day. There are numerous notifications were being given, and so not only is the supervisory team fielding a lot of questions, but also fielding those walk-ins directly. We've seen an increase in walk-ins. I was gonna have that pulled because people don't necessarily wanna call a customer support and wait online, and they don't wanna go to the self-service portal or don't have the ability. They might not have a cell phone, they might not have a computer, or have a service provider that will help them with that. So we will still sit down with people that walk in our door. That is a priority. So if you hear that we won't see people, that is untrue.
And so if we do hear that, should we bring that to your attention with that particular case in the specifics?
Yep.
A comment listening, it would seem that could easily take a path to get caught up in the weeds and the minutia of our zone and what we're doing. And, I think to Rick's point earlier, I think it's, also important for us to recognize there's a strategic role that we can play as the state's largest county. And I'm wondering if at some point we should have that holistic view and maybe a revisit of how this was launched 2 years ago, and then look at this as a system-wide and a strategic, because we have the horsepower in many regards in Cass County than the state, and kind of be the leader in this transformation. But I still think I would use that word. We're not totally clear with where this is going to end up with the effort and the big picture goals, whether that's the department or the legislature. And part of me, when I was thinking that when Rick was speaking, we need a consistent dashboard of metrics that we're moving forward, and the data that maybe existed 5 years ago to what you're recording now, what's been said here doesn't match up. And so long term, I think we need to step back and just kind of keep that in perspective, because it's easy to get caught into the weeds of day-to-day activity, but where are we going long term, next 2 to 4 to 6 years? Just a comment as I was listening, and so there's a reason probably the legislature added a legislative seat each of these zone boards. So I think that's another example maybe of strengthening this as time goes on.
I believe dashboards are in the process, but for economic assistance, they are not out there yet. But that dashboard conversation, and I agree. I think with all your input, it could be useful by the next legislative session to get a hold on what's working, what's not working. And strategically, and I've always said, we're the largest county. That does not make us better or worse, but we have to be able to serve our citizens and those in need. So that's a very good point.
Gail, just to kind of add on to what Tony was saying, just listening as well, that's kind of where I was leaning, meaning whatever data is useful should be collected and reported, but it should tell a story that basically allows us to advise you on how we can make it better and or create an action plan always in the next legislative session to basically tell the story. So when I look at this, and I see in October we served 11,000 households, and in March we served almost 1,800 more. The question I have is, do we have the staffing capacity to go up to 1,800 in less than 6 months of households? And if that does pull back down to 11,000 again sometime during the year, then it's a matter of, okay, where's the ideal staffing capacity? And are we there, yes or no? And if we're no and we're significantly behind, then we basically need to pick it up. And how do we support that? And it could be funding, or it could be this or that, but it could more likely than not involve the legislative, but also locally with all of our horsepower here, how can we advise you to help solve that or point you in the right direction so that we can get on top of
It
it?
might be helpful, there's a staffing workbook, that's basically the workbook, part of redesign for our region. So people were just assigned to lanes, and based on the metrics that were established at that time, they said you needed 25 people in lane 1. You needed X amount of eligibility workers in lane 3. And I could maybe just share that. Like, that's looking, the staffing is now looked as a region, not as what's sitting in our seats here for Cass Human Service Zone, as a region, because it's, I maybe did say something in one meeting, because I said I'm a little tired of being managed by a spreadsheet. So maybe that wasn't appropriate, but it had to be said, because, well, the data was telling them we needed X amount of workers, region-wide, not, and I think we're a little different in the fact of the services we provide directly to clients, people walking in our door. And we need to be responsive. Plus, we need our team members to feel like, because they're going from a case management approach to a process management approach, which is very different. If I started and thought I'm going to be working with 100 clients and helping those elderly, and now I'm just processing, certain parts of the program. It's a little different mindset. So we want to keep
Completely
those.
different job, not
Yeah.
just a little bit, it's completely different.
And that kind of goes to the point, the data will only get you halfway there or quarterly there, and then you bring in the full story would allow us, I think, as an advisory council to basically say, hey, taking all that into account going forward, this could possibly help, I don't know, but data always only tells one side of the story, you can't
Right.
just look at the numbers.
Very good discussion. I appreciate the discussion, and I'll take that back to the drawing board. Robert, did you have something?
Gail, members of the board, I was going to say I appreciate this conversation and the thought of sort of reassessing the process at some point, because Gail and I have had a couple of recent conversations with folks from DHS, and I know Gail will probably go into more detail at this at the appropriate time, but the overall tone of that conversation that I took away was that there are going to be standards that the zone is judged by coming into play at some point in the near future. And we haven't told you exactly what those standards are yet, but they're coming, so you better be ready for them. And in my own view, without a understanding of the volume or of the challenges that the zone is going through in completing these tasks. And so I think, and again, I'm very much sort of an outside looking in here, that from the county administrator, not directly involved in the zone, but it sure felt in these meetings that I've been in that, boy, you're being put in a tough spot. It's not your words, it's mine, but you're being put in a tough spot.
I appreciate, Robert was invited to that meeting, so, and I debriefed with Robert afterwards. I'm like, I'm not really quite sure what that was all about. And I still am a little hesitant,
I don't know what it was about.
I'm an optimist.
I'm going to venture to say that they didn't know what it was about.
Yeah.
One last comment, then I'll get off of this. I was going to say this before Robert spoke, but I'll even more emphasizing it now, because you talk about we're process managed. And you talk about being judged based upon certain criteria.
Yes.
So my concern is that the criteria is only process criteria. I'm wondering, somewhere in there, hopefully they're talking about outcome, measurement. I haven't heard that talked about at all at this meeting. It's all about processes and cases and whatever, and I look back when we have introduction to this board, with the videos we watch, and, we're a zone board, and our primary, I shouldn't say this, I feel our primary concern should be outcomes. Are we serving the people we need to serve in the appropriate way? And that has nothing to do with what's going on in the office. It has, are we taking care of the people that deserve it and require it? And yeah, there's a way to get there, but I don't hear a lot about outcome measurement at this latest piece. That's my last 2 cents.
Yeah, my only response to that, I would think the outcome, my response to the state partners that Robert and I met with, I said, well, aren't we already, our programs are supervised by the state. We have, economic assistance, timeliness, with CPS. I said it just felt like another report. They're already supervising those outcomes. We're supposed to, doesn't talk about delivering the services, but are we getting that SNAP benefit application processed in the time frame it's supposed to be processed? Are we getting out on the CPS calls by the time? I said, we're already monitored on those. Why do I need another level of monitoring for the same thing? So,
I got one more question. This process, I think, has got everybody confused. You go from a case management, maybe a family, maybe you got a quarterback on a family, and now we're all process driven. Do you have some type of something you could send us that we understand where we were and where we're at today? It feels like we've added in a lot of process steps, which becomes confusing especially for the client if they're working with people all over.
I think the client won't, the back end of things doesn't affect the client, like the application. They can still walk in and do a paper application. We will scan it in, and it might be work from somebody in west North Dakota. And then they could walk in and say, I have a question about my case. We would meet with them. Somebody would come up and be able to answer that. But overall, across the state, they are encouraged to use the self-service portal, which I think would benefit some people. Like, you can just go on there and see where your case is at. You can call the call center if you can get through and check on things. So for some people, if you're working, you're receiving LIHEAP, that might be a really good process. But some of the population that, especially in Cass County, our immigrant population, refugees being resettled, homeless populations, SNAP cards, we cannot issue SNAP cards out of our office any longer. So if somebody loses their SNAP card or does not have a mailing address, it's a problem. And we have a lot of homeless in our community that we serve, and that is a problem. So,
One last comment. Have you chatted with Commissioner Peterson in the last week or so, who has a very specific example of a timeline issue that a local family has dealt with because they were local family referred off to a center of service in a different zone, another part of the state, and it ended up, I'll put you in touch.
I think I remember that.
So
Commissioner
are
Peterson.
families that have those situations, because I run across quite a few of them, supposed to contact a legislator? I mean, I work for the state, so we can never say something like that, so that never happens, but, it's like, where do they go?
Well, some
I
contact
said
the
that-
governor's office, and then we get an email.
I send her to walk in your guys' door.
And,
That's what I
and
do,
that would be my suggestion. Like, I want to meet their needs, and if they can walk in, we will serve and figure it out, rather than direct.
And just to echo what you said a few minutes ago, it's never the person, it's never the worker at Cass County, it's always the system. It is always not having their
Appreciate
food stamp case approved timely, so then it closes, their TANF case, or their monthly report processed timely, because they can't get it in, or they send an email to the center and it gets returned, because their email load is overloaded, and so they're not accepting any more emails.
Yeah, that was an issue too.
Yeah, or there's a wait time on the call center and they can't wait, or whatever it might be, so we just send them to walk through your front door. But, you know, if there's a better way to, affect change in this process, you know, maybe we should be referring them that way.
Yeah, I think ultimately, like Tony said, you know, positioning with the right information to tell the story of what's, you know, maybe something is working good, maybe and what isn't, and how can we come to some outcome-based things for the best interests of those that are served.
Well, just to, before you switch, I think you're going to next, just a comment, you know, judgment was used, you know, data, this transition. I will always bet on local versus state, that's just, local's more close. So I hope you and your team don't feel that we're always gonna have your back, because we're committed to this and supporting, but I just think that I wouldn't wake at night worrying about being judged. I would focus on how do we better the system and what we can do as a board to help you, whether that's evangelizing the facts of life to the right people as we go through this next period of 2 years. So this world of auditing and everything else, I would not be, going to be cognizant of it and it's part of your responsibility, but I wouldn't.
I'm glad you brought that up. I was just gonna follow up in that way too. You know, it sounds like that meeting was pretty unsettling, so I was curious if there was support our body here could provide to you, or do you have any, do you have a clear understanding of when you're gonna learn more or what the next steps are?
From that meeting, no, I don't. I thought, I did ask when would that be taking effect, and well, January. And then I said, what are the next steps? Are you meeting with other zone board or zone directors? Yeah, but nope, I've talked to some, they haven't had a meeting. And then I thought we just had a zone directors meeting last week, but it wasn't on the agenda. So I still have some, I'm gonna be following up with that.
Just to echo what Tony said, I think that we could be supportive in some way. I think you mentioned special considerations for Cass County with people coming through the front doors and all of the different pieces that it wouldn't make sense to compare us, you know, out and out to other zones. So if there's other things we can do to be helpful,
Appreciate that.
to do that.
I jotted down some notes, hope Shayna's taken those in. In the interest of time, I appreciate the discussion, and I think that gets us further ahead, but want to also, probably not as important, the second page of the updated personnel recruiting really goes into some specifics related to family services. Our department and some efforts we've moved forward with to really address a situation there with regards to really having enough workers. We have the FTEs, it's the workforce, and we need to move forward. So we're moving forward with a few things that is highlighted on there to support key retention for certain positions within that department that have ongoing vacancies. And then, because right now we have 8 vacancies in CPS. That's the front door. We cannot turn off the faucet of reports. We need people to be able to take those reports and do it. So we are going to be working through a hiring blitz this spring through July. And we've done a couple of proposals to our state partners. One of them is to do a recruitment bonus, and that has been approved. So we will be advertising with a bonus for eligible people coming in and really shortening up the time frame of our hiring process to always keep those zone roster or the rosters coming forward to, like, by the end of July, hopefully be onboarding some. The recruitment bonuses are for certain positions within that department, really social workers, family service specialists. I get them confused because there's a state job that's very, family service specialists and our case management staff. Those boots on the ground, direct people that are needed. So we're pleased that that is moving forward, and we're gonna really focus our next few months on that with the help of Samantha. And then I'm also taking a little bit of time. We've reassigned some duties with Heather's departure within administration. And then hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we can decide, and we were just doing that. Like I've been here just not even a year and a half yet, so it was just time. We were sitting down as an admin team to look at what's working, what's not working, where those duties are. And now with Heather's departure, I want to make sure we're moving forward with the right, request and to fill that position again, because now Shayna is the EA manager that used to be part of Heather's role. So we are looking at that, and hopefully we'll get that turned around and posted fairly soon. In the interest of time, is there a meeting in here after this? Okay.
I got one more quick question. Maybe you can tell us this later, but it seems like 11 terminations. Seems like a lot year to date. Now, maybe you just had a wave of them or whatever, but.
There is, I think on here, well, that's just family services. 11, no, those aren't they're departures. They're not terminations. So they're departures. So it can be somebody leaving for a better changing job, somebody leaving because I moved, and there are a few of those. That's not on here. That's a good point.
Segue into your last set of slides. So we met in December, talked about equity and salary increases, timing of the salary increases, decisions on hiring vacancies, a number of things we've listed. If you were the teacher, what letter grade would you apply to the outcome of the legislative session?
I would, related to, well, the first few things, and that I think that is like a good B,
You wanna ask me?
The
Because I'm not gonna be that generous.
timeliness of the FTEs. I guess this is my personal frustration. We have FTEs assigned to us as a zone. And every FTE that is vacant because they move, or it's a CPS worker, or it's Heather's, I need to go to the committee to get approval to fill that position. And I say, we want to manage to fill the services provided to the Cass Human Service Zone, as well as work as a team statewide. But if I would deviate from what that position is, yes, they meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and typically it's a timely response, but sometimes it's not a timely response. And
Did you say as a teacher?
Well, she was a teacher
Yeah.
applying a letter grade to.
I'd say a B plus,
Oh, okay.
a B
What did you
plus.
think of-
I thought you meant as a teacher in the state.
Oh, no, a teacher. Going to that legislative thing, the budget bill, and you can just review these slides when you have time. The increase, year one will be average of a 6%, and then year two will be an average of a 4%. So I think that's good. The overall pool of where the zones, that 457 fund, I believe, went up 20 million for that to help increase. And then our legislatively approved performance-based increases will be done July 1st instead of on January 1st. So we will be on the same increase level, which I think it's ultimately the same, but that will impact team members. I think that's a very positive thing. The other positive change too, there was some money added for equity, 3.75 million. I just found out last week that that I thought there would be a work group put together to decide how that will be applied. My understanding last week, and you can read in the director's report, and I might just provide a little commentary. Chris Jones attended our director's meeting, and I think it's just put in some formula and it's spit out and will be given guidance. My gut is telling me I don't think in Cass Human Service Zone we will see much of that. I'm not sure. Maybe with some compression issues with salary. One other highlight towards the very end of the session, Senate Bill 2012, there was an amendment put into place really in the last few days. It did fail, but that amendment was would require state employment of all zone personnel. That did fail, but my meeting last week, Chris Jones, Jessica Thomason was there, and others from the department. Chris Jones, who's the Commissioner of Health and Human Services, did say it's the ultimate goal that all Human Service Zone employees will become state employees. There was others from zone directors that said absolutely not, that's not how this started. It was a little heated, so it was very interesting. There's some general things in there. Just in the interest of time, I don't want to, one of the things that would be coming into play is, as Tony brought up, a state legislator is to be appointed to zone boards. I have a couple ideas or would like to open it up, and I don't think we have to wait till that passes. We could provide some recommendations to the commission if people are interested, and start sooner than later.
You know, if I can on that, just I know when we started out with the idea that we could appoint a legislator to the board, and my understanding was that the last go around, we couldn't find any zone legislators who were interested
Oh, really?
in this board.
I think there's a couple.
Oh, there is, okay.
And I'm not sure if I had some names wrote down here, I don't know where my notes went. Senator Davison, who I've met with prior to even the legislative session. When I started the job, I had reached out to a few legislators. I believe he's maybe interested. And my suggestion, I'm open to discussion. I'm wondering if, because of Cass's size and the amount of legislators, maybe two to have on, and I might suggest, I believe there's an interest in Gretchen Dobrovich. She's in public health. She's a different area. She might be interested, I've heard. I haven't talked, maybe Brandy Pyle, Representative Pyle, to have one from each side, but I'm open to reach out to any that you might suggest. So if you have some to suggest, I'd be happy to do that before the next time, so we can get some potential interest and forward that on to, the commission would have to approve.
My only 2 cents, I have talked to Senator Davis and he remains interested. And having spent 22 years, 14 which were on appropriations, if you can get folks with experts in human services on appropriations, that's a wise thing.
Thoughts on having more than one? Or one?
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, if you could.
Any other suggestions? I know I'd be open to reaching out, but I can reach out to Senator Davison. I think he's been very open to talking.
Yeah, I watched a number of the video sessions of committee hearings and subcommittees, and particularly human services. And Senator Davison really understands it, gets it, and he knows how to move the meter. And so I just think, you know, he'd be strong consideration for us to consider. What if there's 2 or 3, the more, I shouldn't say the more the merrier, but
There's a limit.
Okay.
one from each chamber maybe.
Yeah, I'm not sure
And Senator Hogan and Senator Lee are also experts in their field. Having that interest that Senator Davis has, for example, and on appropriations at the table really matters.
I can reach out to Senator Davison and then ask if you guys have any other suggestions, I'm more than happy to reach out.
I think most of those mentioned would be great candidates. I also know Senator Davison, and I'd be an excellent candidate. I did sit next to him when we had that small group meeting, and I know him from prior experience as well, and he seemed very interested and concerned about what was going on. He would be, I would agree with Tony, a good candidate.
Great, I will move forward with that. Next item on our agenda, last little bit, talking about I'm going to bring it up again, the board meeting frequency. Thank you for adjusting this last meeting. I had my first experience doing a district court hearing in an adoption dispute case, so I did not know how long that would take, and it took most of the day. So that's why we had to change it here. So I was going to provide a suggestion that maybe we don't meet in June because we're already halfway through May. And that first, how about July 3rd would be the first Monday?
July 3rd, before the 4th.
Well, is there
Weekend.
a
Are you
commission
kidding?
meeting? Is there a commission meeting?
You're gonna have to
When
move it on.
When is the commission meeting?
Let me check the schedule.
I think
We meet the 5th,
we
don't
go
we?
out like
The
a,
5th?
Yeah.
Then you'd meet Wednesday? Let me get a chance to look at that.
how about the following week or something? A lot of vacations.
Yeah, that's, otherwise it could be.
We are meeting the 5th, rather than go the 3rd, we're meeting the 5th.
You want I'm open the 5th or the following Monday,
Following Monday would be, there's a lot of vacations.
the 10th, July 10th. Does that work? We'll plan for July 10th. And then I was going to suggest, and we don't have to make a decision right now, to do September, skip October, and then do November and December. But we can make that decision. We just know July 10th, the Monday at 1 o'clock will be our next, if everybody's open to that.
1 o'clock, 10
Yeah.
o'clock?
1 o'clock, July 10th.
10, 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock. Since, in the interest of time, I've provided a written board report, highlighted some of the things that happened at that meeting last week, but I think with the commentary that Robert had provided and some things, it will be interesting and maybe important to have. I'm looking forward to your support and advice moving forward in some of those areas.
You always had just a clarification. When you talked about the annual performance increases, you said average of 6%. The screen would, your
Up to.
slides is up to 6%. What one is it?
My understanding, we haven't got the guidance from the department yet, but as a budget, I have to average up to 6%.
Okay, so your average is 6. Okay, gotcha.
Any other motion to adjourn do I have?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? We will, thank you for the great discussion.